Welcome to the News9 Plus Show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. India is in the midst of a civil aviation boom. It has 149 operational civil airports, which is twice the number we had a decade ago. Last year, 152 million passengers flew domestically, a record number. In fact, India has the world's third largest number of domestic passengers by volume, and it's projected to be the third overall by 2026, where it will see 500 million airline passengers by 2030. But are those passengers flying in comfort, or quite literally in cattle class? Now, the fog-induced delays in North India over the last couple of days have seen passengers lose their cool, sit on the tarmac, and even assault pilots. Now, joining me to discuss the state of play today are Group Captain MG Augustine Vinod, Consumer Affairs Advocate Ankit Gupta, and my colleague Ajit Vijay Kumar, who tracks civil aviation. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus Show. I want to start by asking you, Group Captain Vinod, yesterday the DGCA issued a list of SOPs to airlines. What all they must do in case of cancellations and delays and fog. And now, I would think that this is the normal SOP. Are these being followed, or are these being breached frequently so that the ministry has to keep issuing these, or is the ministry just doing its bit and passing the buck on?
It's a very loaded question. I'll tell you why it is a loaded question, because like you in the opening statement of yours, you talked about how the civil aviation in India is booming, and how many, people are traveling. The number of people who are traveling today are much more than probably population of certain countries.
Yes.
In fact, I tweeted about it. Indigo alone carried more than half the Pakistan last year, more than 1 million passengers. So the boom is happening in terms of travel,
right?
In terms of number of aeroplanes coming in, and the infrastructure is trying to catch up with that boom.
Right.
Well, so, which is what we are seeing everywhere, and the catch-up. I'm a current Airbus captain, and with that as a background, I'm saying this. The catch-up is happening quite well in tier 2, tier 3 cities.
Right.
The way small airports have come up in a short time is commendable, to say the least.
Yes.
But the problem is in large airports, in metros, where you have issues with real estate and issues with continuing to do a 24/7 operation while doing the infrastructure improvement is a huge challenge. It is like you trying to live in the same house that you're renovating. Imagine the amount of headache you will go through. So exactly the same thing is happening with Delhi. But let me tell you a few commendable things that Delhi did. Last winter, we had 3 runways. This winter also, we have 3 runways. Because between the winter time, they operationalized another runway towards Dwarka.
Yeah.
Which was 1129. Earlier, there was only 1129. Now 1129 left and 1129 right. 2 runways are there. And there is, you must have seen, I'm sure, the taxi track connecting the traffic from the other side, the T1 side onto this side, which goes over the road.
Yeah.
It's a Herculean task constructing
yeah, it's an
that
engineering
kind of taxi
marvel,
track.
actually. That
Absolutely. So they are playing catch up, and they are playing well. But yesterday was, or on the Sunday was unprecedented, to say the least. I will draw a comparison, Sandeep, to, I'm just touch wood, it shouldn't happen with anybody. But say you're traveling from A to B and you have in a train, and you have a minor hiccup, like maybe one bogie has derailed, and for safety, they tell all the passengers to disembark, and you will disembark in the middle of nowhere, and you will be happy to disembark. Am I right?
Yes.
Because
safety, absolutely. So, safety is important.
Absolutely important. So I'm sure you're going to discuss that topic, what happened in Mumbai down the road. But my small point is as passengers, as operators, as the airport authorities, airport people, all of us have to come together in tackling a situation which is probably could happen once in maybe a decade. Because
Right.
this kind of unprecedented loss, drop in visibility,
Yeah.
less than 75 meters also for some time.
Right.
See, 75 meters is required in Airbus for takeoff, for landing.
Yeah.
Whereas for takeoff, because it is automatic landing, Sandeep,
Right. Right.
no landing in Cat 3 condition happens manually. It is
Yeah.
automatic. The aeroplane comes and lands
Yeah.
on
It's
its
all on
own.
instruments.
The
Yeah.
pilot,
Yeah.
all on it. No, absolutely, smooth landing it does.
Yes.
Pilot takes over control only when and it also decelerates on its own. Can you
Right.
believe it?
Right.
It is that kind of technology today. Once it is under control is the time pilot takes over and brings it to the aerobridge. Whereas takeoff is always manual, Sandeep.
Right.
There is not a single aeroplane which is certified for automatic takeoff. So
Yeah.
the critical point, if you look at the tweet of Minister Jyotiraditya ji,
Yeah.
he also talked about how we continue to land, but the takeoff got delayed a little because in takeoff we need 125 meters of visibility.
Yes. Yes.
So the visibility improved, but it was improved only as much adequate for aeroplanes which are holding over it to land,
Yeah.
and people went away home.
Right.
Whereas for the takeoff is where the critical path occurred, and it occurs at least in my lifetime in Delhi. I must have seen it not more than 3 to 4 occasions. So it is one of those occasions when you're one of the bogie in the train that you were traveling derailed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to treat it as such.
Right.
As an incident which is
As
for
a
which
one-off.
you can't be prepared.
Right.
Yeah,
In
you
fact,
can't be prepared.
Captain Augustine, I want to bring in Mr. Gupta into this. Ankit, what are the rights of passengers in a scenario like this? When your flights are delayed, you've been seeing that increasingly. There's been a lot of complaints from the passengers that the airlines didn't, follow the SOPs. They didn't give them refreshments. They were handled very badly. I mean, you think there's an issue here of airlines, in this rush to ensure on-time performance, they kind of giving consumers a short shrift?
Definitely. See, for traveling in air is something like a dream for some of us.
Yeah.
It is like a business trip for some of us. It is like catching another flight for some of us. Definitely, we always look ahead that the kind of atmosphere and the treatment should be given to us should be a world-class treatment. And the civil aviation requirements also clearly speaks about as to what are the responsibilities of the airlines in the scenario where there are delayed flights or cancelled flights. There have been several guidelines, SOPs in play since long, but the problem is practical implementation of the same at the ground level, which is missing. At times, people get frustrated when the airline staff does not cooperate with them, does not pass on the right information. So in that scenario, the real issues arises. And these kind of conflicts, as we have seen a couple of days back, that person in the flight hitting a pilot, the senior most position of the aircraft.
Absolutely.
So
I mean, that represents
kind of things are really happening a lot.
Right, but Ajit, you've been tracking this very closely. What are the rights of passengers in scenarios like this, and do you believe that they're being adequately informed by airlines? Look, if this happens, if you miss the flight because of fog or force majeure, this is what you have get. If it's our fault, we will do this for you. All of that, is this being adequately communicated, you think?
Right. So a lot of this is part of your ticket.
Right.
So it's the fine print.
It's the fine print which no one bothers to read.
No one bothers to read, right? So the most important of your rights are mentioned there, right there.
Right.
But we don't bother to read, and that's because such instance happened, once in a, in one full calendar, it will happen for 10 days, 15 days that you are bothered by such things.
Yeah.
That way, and then that's the reason we don't end up reading all of this.
Right.
Like for example, what happened with that man, hitting the pilot.
Yes.
So one of the reasons that people who were on board that plane, they said that it was because we were waiting since 7:30 in the morning, and we were provided food at 4 p.m.
Right.
So as per rules, as per the rights of the passenger, the airline is mandated to provide you food.
Yeah.
After 2 hours, no, if your flight is delayed for 2 hours,
Right.
then you are mandated to provide food. But then
Right.
that's not done.
Okay.
Right. So one has to understand that given the whole situation where people know that any misbehavior,
Yeah.
on board a plane leads to severe action,
Right.
one would be pushed to that point to having, done that.
Right.
This is not in any manner, defending what it did.
Right.
But then the airlines will have to also understand that they have to also be sensitive
Yeah.
to the rights of the passengers. They have to ensure that there's free flow of information.
Yeah.
So it has to be done from both sides for this to not reoccur.
Right. In fact, Captain Augustine, while it's no one's absolutely defending what that passenger did, but like Ajit mentioned, that there were a certain set of circumstances there where passengers were basically kept up waiting for 8 hours, 9 hours, no refreshments. I think we've gotten so used to easy, comfortable air travel that when we hit an air pocket of this intensity, I think tempers fray and people do the unimaginable. But what do you think? Does this incident need to be investigated in depth to ensure that there's no such recurrence in future, especially the part about passengers being kept, and a plane load of passengers being kept waiting without any refreshments by the airline?
It's a great question, Sandeep, and thanks for having me on this program so that I can shed some real light on this issue. Okay, now put yourself in the I won't say yourself. I'll put myself in the shoe of the AOCA staff who are now faced with giving food to stranded passengers.
Yeah.
Now there are two issues there. One is the extent of delay is completely dependent on the information that is coming from meteorological department.
Right.
Now, meteorological department forecasts that the visibility will improve beyond 125, say, at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
So ATC goes by that information. And meteorological officers, mind you, are top-notch, double, triple PhD kind of people. I mean, they have lived their life in meteorology.
Yeah.
So, but it is, once again, it is forecast. So that forecast instead of 10 could become 11 or 12, or in some cases, even 3 hours could elapse before the projected visibility comes up.
Right.
Now the issue, Sandeep, of the projected visibility, it is measured by an equipment called transmissometer. So there is no humans involved.
Right.
Earlier, when I started my career in the 80s, we used to eyeball the visibility.
Yeah.
No longer. Now we have equipment which tells you the exact visibility, and exact visibility is 125 meters required. 124 is not enough.
Right.
So that is the kind of watertight, rules that have been made. Now, I'm putting myself in the AOCF's shoe. Now I need 60 packets of food. The nightmare is to get the 60 packets of food in front of you through the airport from only the authorized contractor who will make the food, check the food for food poisoning, etc. Send it through a proper route, which, through X-ray machine, this, that, BCAS, CISF. So there are 4 or 5 people involved, or 4 or 5 agencies involved before that food reaches the counter number 33 to be given to 40 passengers. So if I press that alarm button of I need 40 packets, to the time the 40 packets get delivered, in real time scenario, Sandeep, is nothing less than 2 hours.
2 hours.
I mean, if I start like cooking right now, I will be able to give it to you only in 2 hours time, nothing before that. Because that is the kind of procedures that are involved to get anything into the airport. And rightly so, because we have in the past faced issues of people getting in unwanted items through these food trucks. If you remember that Lufthansa which got hijacked, they got equipment
in the food trucks. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and rightly so, that these kind of checks and balances are there. And 2 or 3 agencies does checks and balances.
Right, but surely,
So,
I mean, these kind of
had-
things, Captain Augustine, I mean, these things, I mean, you're telling me is there, that's the SOP, but, you know, in emergencies like this, couldn't you have like a, you know, standby kind of thing where, listen, we have passengers stranded there for 8 hours or 10 hours, something. Can we rush food from somewhere, you know, bypass a couple of this thing? I mean, make sure that everything is done, but on a fast track, you know, provide food for them. It's like a, you
The
know.
fast track is 2
Yeah.
hours, and normally, otherwise, like when we get on some food on board
Right.
for our travel, it comes nearly 4 hours before. When it is food which is cooked 4 hours ago.
Right.
Nothing earlier than 4 hours is what is the norm. But you know, be that as it may, you know, which is why I tweeted to you know, Mantri ji. For such situation, we should have some kind of ready-to-eat food kept ready, and probably every 3 months you throw it. Doesn't matter.
Within the aircraft.
But it is there.
Right. Okay.
Within the aircraft or within the premises
Right.
of airport.
Yeah.
Keep it ready, maybe 500 packets, and every 3 months just replenish it, throw it. How does it matter?
Right,
Because you're
right.
keeping
Of
it for that rainy day, isn't it? It
Yes.
is like you having a handy plast
Right.
bandage in your wallet.
Right.
You never know when you will get hurt.
Absolutely. That's
So-
a very important suggestion. I mean, keep MREs ready. I mean, just like how the military does, you have MREs ready,
Yeah,
standby whenever the thing. But, you know, to conclude, Ajit, I want to ask you this. While we're talking about all these issues, I mean, communication is obviously the big problem here, that very often passengers don't get the full picture what's going on. They have this ballpark thing called operational reasons. You think that's one of the major issues here, that you just get this anodyne thing, you're not updated enough, you keep getting operational reasons, but as Group Captain
operational information,
mentioned, yeah.
operational information. But when you know that these passengers have been waiting
Right.
for 4 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours,
Right.
then one has to, the airline has to understand that they are also running short of
Right.
in terms of patience, right?
Patience.
So that's why, you know, it would make sense that they now henceforth, I think we should have a better approach to how you deal with sharing information with passengers.
Right,
And
right.
and it can not just be SMS, it can be WhatsApp as well, whatever.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then, and the most important thing I think here is that there should be uniformity in terms of what is being told to the passenger.
Right.
Like in this case of what happened here in
Yes,
Delhi,
yes.
the ground staff was telling something else to the passengers, and
multiple channels of
multiple channels were
communications
giving
and-
them multiple information.
Absolutely.
That was also leading
Right.
to the chaos. I think a centralized way of looking at it, and through multiple channels.
Communications, more better SOPs, following SOPs, but we're completely out of time here. I'd like to thank Group Captain Augustine for joining us. Ankit, thank you very much for your insights, and my colleague Ajit. This is a story that's going to occupy our mind spaces for the next couple of days. As Ajit was saying, that the fog situation doesn't seem to be improving. But while the Indian aviation sector is going through a boom, it's up to us to ensure that passengers are treated with the care and comfort that they really look forward to. Maritime commerce warfare is as old as maritime commerce itself. It means attacking the enemy's maritime trade routes. In the last century, the US Navy destroyed the empire of Japan in the Second World War by sinking Japanese warships and merchantmen and isolating the Japanese home islands. In the 1980s, India was affected by this during the tanker wars of the 1980s between Iraq and Iran, when this war threatened our energy supplies. And now, for the first time since the 1980s, India is once again looking at this scenario of maritime commerce warfare. The Iran-backed Houthis have been attacking merchant ships headed to and from Israel in the Red Sea. The Houthis have recently expanded their targets to US merchantmen as well. And not so long ago, 2 India-bound merchant ships were recently attacked by Houthis. The Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar recently visited Iran, possibly to cool things down. Now, joining me to discuss this alarming prospect of maritime warfare at sea are Commodore Srikanth Keshnur and my colleague Karthik Malhotra. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus Show. Srikanth, welcome back. You've had a round of travel across the country recently lecturing. But
Thank you so much. Good to be with you.
yeah, the time for theory is over, and we are looking at the practical application of maritime warfare, Srikanth. I mean, how alarming is this fact that, the number of attacks on merchant ships? I mean, who knew this ragtag guerrilla outfit had the capability to interdict merchant shipping in the Red Sea?
Yeah, of course, it is alarming. And Sandeep, I must, take you to one issue. Like a historian, we need to go back a little. Probably just as many in today's generation may be excused for feeling that food comes through Zomato or other instant Swiggy services
Yeah.
and remove the farmer from the conveyor belt, so
Yes.
to say. I think a lot of world had got accustomed, as a recent article says, to peaceful seas.
Yes.
Now, peaceful seas is very much a post-World War II construct,
Right.
and that has an effect because most of our countries make their foreign policy security planners
Yeah.
are all from a post-World War II sort of era.
Right.
That having been said, commercial traffic was always subjected to predation, to attack, to armed robbery, even
Right.
to molestation before World War II, and that had many ripple consequences. So therefore, the kind of reality checks that sort of, the piracy of Somalia and Gulf of Aden gave about 15 years ago, and
Right.
now the Houthis are giving, is to tell us that the seas are never safe unless countries make concerted efforts to do it.
Right.
That there is no such thing as a doorstep trade service.
Yes.
There's no such thing as doorstep trade
Right.
unless the navies of the world make that possible.
Right.
So it's very alarming, and,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that certain steps are being taken to sort of allay that. But like you brought out, I mean, if I may just go a little further, I think fundamentally the two or three different things that the Houthis have done is,
Yeah.
one is brought in, firstly, a greater element of sophistication through the use of drones, missiles, and all
Yes.
that, which was not there even with the piracy of coast of Somalia.
Right.
So the kind of upheaval this has caused is much more. Second is that by hitching it to the Israeli cause, they have been clever in ensuring that there is no sort of global consensus, at
Right,
least at this
right.
point of time, on how to tackle it, which was there in case of the earlier piracy issue.
Right.
The third is this also emboldens other actors.
Yes.
That is why you see a slight revival of Somali piracy. It also emboldens other actors in an area that's been traditionally very geopolitically fragile and
Right.
some would say interesting. Therefore, to my mind, this is very dangerous. It has dangerous ramifications, and I think the world needs to do something, and India is also doing something regarding it.
Absolutely. And yeah, thanks for that very interesting, preamble, Srikanth, to this discussion, and the fact that, there's nothing as doorstep delivery of goods and services, that while Zomato might have convinced us that that's the case, it's clearly not the case. And Karthik, you've been following the Commerce Ministry very closely, and while we're sitting thousands of kilometers away from this conflict zone, tell us how much of a worry these spate of attacks are for Indian commerce.
Sandeep, I think the Suez Canal is absolutely critical to India's trade. And when
Right.
I say India's trade, it is critical to India's exports and it is critical to India's import as
Yes.
well. So from a pure play commercial perspective, I mean, if we leave the war aside,
Yeah.
typically from a commercial perspective, there are enough and more reports which are suggesting that it is going to cost India's exports dearly. As much as $30 billion, which is 6 to 7% of India's overall export volume when you
Right.
compare the data to last year. Now, why is this going to be critical? Number of reasons. Number one, India's exports to the West go through the Suez Canal.
Yes.
And if the Red Sea continues to be, in this conflicted sort of
Yeah.
zone, then you will have to get container ships to take the longer Cape of Good Hope route.
Absolutely.
Now, that route entails at least 14 additional days of travel.
Right.
Then add to that, there is a risk premium associated, which
Yes.
is in fact now even going higher and higher with insurance costs going up. Every day being on sea is adding to your fuel cost,
Yes.
is adding to the salaries, is adding overall to delays in cargo. So that is one aspect of it, that your exports are going to become competitive. Now, it's
Right.
important to look at it in the context of what is happening overall in trade in the world. Now, if you see the data which has come in just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, where the exports from China to US,
Yeah.
just to give an example, have reduced about 20%. In the same period, India's electronic exports, and I'm talking about the month of Jan to September 2023, India's electronics exports to the US have doubled.
Right.
If I break it down further, India's smartphone exports to the US alone have gone up 5 times in the last calendar year.
Right.
Now imagine all of this taking 14 days longer for each container ship
Yes.
to reach its destination is
Right.
not going to keep our exports competitive.
Yes.
China has got other routes to take.
Right.
The Arabian Sea is not as much of a problem for China
Right.
as it is for India.
Right.
Now, if I talk about the import side of the story, that is actually even more alarming.
Yeah.
So a lot of experts right now just focusing on what it is going to cost India's exports.
Right.
But India's import, and India being an oil importing nation, all the oil that flows into India is actually again flowing through the Suez Canal.
Right.
Now, what this conflict is also doing is that this conflict is adding pressure on oil prices.
Yes.
Oil prices have gone up and they're back in the range of about $80 per barrel. India's comfort zone right now is $85, but if it breaches at $85 level, and even at $80, which is an elevated oil crude price for India, you're looking at your import bill going up. That is going to further add pressure on the Indian rupee.
Yes.
And if there is more pressure on the Indian rupee, we'll have to sell our forex reserves to keep the rupee under check.
Absolutely.
So overall, if you ask me, we are looking at a huge problem staring at us.
Yeah, you're looking at a huge problem, Karthik, as you mentioned. I was just reading this article in this German newspaper, Welt am Sonntag, which says that the world economy is losing 360,000 euros per hour. That's 3.25 crore rupees per hour, just on account of the Houthi attacks. And Srikanth, that brings me to my next question, that you're a naval strategist, you're also a historian. You look at the big picture here. Is someone behind the Houthis? Is someone giving them the big picture? Listen, this is what you need to do. This is phase A, phase B, phase C. And before you know it, you've hit the world commerce and you've proved a point. This seems to be too, well thought of a plan to be the work of, so-called non-state actors. Give us your thoughts on this.
Of course, I'll agree with you, and I'll come to that in a minute. Just to add to what Karthik said, in addition to all the costs, remember there are also ripple consequences in terms of logistics nightmare when your sequencing of your ports will have to change for your goods coming in and out when you go around the Cape of Good Hope, and the need possibly for extra carriers, which in turn adds to the cost. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that whether it's the insurers, whether it is the freight company, whether it's the shipping companies or the cargo companies, ultimately the cost is passed on to you and me, the consumer.
Absolutely, the consumers.
So any such thing will result in, probably Karthik is better, but it could affect inflationary trends too. Now the big picture, as you say, obviously I would think that there is a country associated. The Houthis have for long been getting support from state actors.
Right.
Please look at some of the trends. None of the Chinese ships have been targeted.
Yes.
So there is a country that is in sort of cahoots with China. Secondly, the kind of missile technology, availability of missiles, intelligence would indicate that there is a country that is supporting.
Right.
And it doesn't need rocket science to find out which of the countries is interested in sort of having a say in regional affairs and in sort of challenging what it perceives is the American hegemony.
Right.
And also remember that country could also affect oil trade coming through the Persian Gulf.
Right.
So obviously this is done with state support.
Yes.
And I think most people know that Houthis are being supported in a sense by lots of literature seems to indicate that there is a Iranian hand into this.
Yes.
That will have to be investigated, but clearly it is not possible for a non-state actor to have so much let's say, intelligence, so much sophistication.
Yes.
You know, having said that, also this reflects a little bit change in the dynamics of maritime warfare when having small, a thing in your arsenal like the drones can
Yes.
create huge impact.
Right.
So the asymmetries of warfare are brought to bear upon in a very clever way by whoever is playing the game, which is why you need a concerted effort by countries, and you need that to be patient.
Yes.
And no matter what are the challenges at the political level in terms of coordination, there
Right.
will be many. At the operational level, countries need to coordinate to eliminate or bring this to a certain threshold.
Absolutely. And Karthik, as Commodore Kesur mentioned, there is a big game underway. There are other actors at play. China, for instance,
Absolutely.
Iran.
Absolutely.
Iran directly and China
Yes,
indirectly.
yes.
But Karthik, would China not also be affected by what's going on right now? Because this is going to have a ripple effect on global trade, and China is one of the biggest trading nations in the world. Would they not also lose in the long run?
I think China would obviously tend to lose as well. Would it lose as much as India would lose? Perhaps not.
Right.
Now, talking specifically about oil, and I think what the trend that we saw with oil imports, China is also incidentally an oil importing nation.
Yes.
And when India started buying the Russian oil, India's Russian oil also flows through the Suez Canal channel. Whereas in the case of China, they've got other avenues to bring that Russian oil to their shores and in the mainland.
Right.
So I think the import bill delta on China's economy is going to be far lesser in magnitude as compared to India.
Yes.
And I think the Commodore was absolutely right when he spoke about inflation as well.
Yes.
Now, inflation, there are two aspects to inflation. One, of course, is domestic inflation. So if products, goods which are reaching the Indian shores because of these delays and because of these elevated costs are going to be expensive, obviously that cost gets passed on to the Indian consumer.
Right.
But if you were to talk about global inflation, Sandeep, unfortunately or fortunately for the US,
Yes.
the US inflation
Right.
may not actually get deeply impacted with what is happening in the Red Sea.
Yeah.
I'm talking specifically oil, because US is able to take care of most of its oil requirements
Right.
domestically. And whatever little delta is there from which it depends on imports, I think those are easily getting fulfilled by Mexico. So
Right.
overall, the stickiness of inflation in US may not directly, with oil prices changing,
Yeah.
may not directly get impacted, but then goods coming into US or coming into Europe also for that matter, taking a longer route, are going to become expensive for those economies as well.
In
So there
Europe,
would be
yes.
an inflation impact on the West, not as pronounced as an inflation impact on India, and there would be, a trade impact on China, not as pronounced as India. So India seems to be the most vulnerable right now,
Yes.
with whatever is happening,
Yep.
with no direct reason for India to be involved in that conflict,
Right.
but India becomes collateral damage.
Absolutely, India becomes collateral damage. And when you said this, Karthik, I was just thinking that, the conflict in West Asia began in October, right?
Yeah.
September, we had literally put the, India Middle East Economic
IMEC.
Corridor,
I think
IMEC.
this was the day that we wanted the IMEC.
Yes,
it
and
may
this is
have
all
helped
the
us
reason
bypass the
for
Suez
us-
Canal completely.
If an IMEC had been there, but I mean, look at the way geopolitics has changed in the last
Absolutely.
4 months.
Absolutely.
You're looking at the IMEC being blocked because the two last pieces of the puzzle, which is Israel and Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
are literally on opposite sides. And today, that our lifeline, which is the Red Sea, is being threatened.
Absolutely.
And India, as you mentioned correctly, stands to lose the most. And in fact, there's a meeting on the 17th of Jan, Srikanth, which it's an interministerial meeting. It's been called on the Red Sea issue. Specifically, it's going to see the Ministry of External Affairs, the Commerce Ministries, Shipping Ministries, Defense Ministry, all of them, they're going to put their heads together. What do you think they're going to discuss? Is there a strategy that's going to be worked out based on this particular blocking of the Red Sea?
I'm sure there will be, and there should be, because please realize this Red Sea imports are very critical. But the Red Sea, the Suez Canal have closed. I mean, we know the previous crises that have happened.
Yeah.
So I would have thought that we should include this in our net assessment in such a way that the consequences of this happening should always be considered
Right,
at the highest
right.
national levels. Having said that, I'm sure they will be discussing it. As I see it, the dilemma, so to say, is that since it has been very, very cleverly or very, let's say, manipulatively hitched to the Israel issue,
Yeah.
it becomes difficult politically for India to take a very, very clear stand
Right.
in the current circumstances. Do remember on a far less controversial issue of counter-piracy patrol against Somalia,
Yeah.
India was not a part of any coalition task force and
Yes.
preferred to do, patrols independently. Now, on the one hand, we have joined the Combined Maritime Task Force. On the other hand, we are somewhat wary about being seen to be completely associated in one camp because that there are genuine fears that that may actually lead to more, targeting of ships bound for India.
Right.
So there are going to be certain worries about which way should we take a political stance. That having been said, I think I've said this before. It is possible for the navies to coordinate operationally a great deal. That happened during the earlier piracy instance, and I'm sure that's happening. The fact that the Indian Navy has put a few of its, cutting-edge destroyers, maritime patrol aircraft, the fact that we took precipitate action recently in a piracy incident should show that the Indian Navy means business being there.
Right.
There will be one odd attack here and there.
Yeah.
I think the strategy dilemma for India is recognizing the clear and present danger of the Houthis,
Right.
trying to see how much it can articulate and what sort of a position it can take. But Red Sea is very, very critically important to us. Just one last bit about what Karthik said. Interestingly, I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the Chinese imports from Iranian oil has become much more over the last 1 or 2 years since Iran has been under sanctions.
Right,
And,
yes.
and most of it is going through a certain dark fleet so that, it doesn't get traced back because of the sanctions. So we don't know what would happen if this Red Sea crisis goes and some way goes closer to the Persian Gulf.
Right.
And often when you let go these things, it can be Frankenstein monsters where it will come back to haunt the countries themselves. that
Absolutely.
probably started
And
it.
Frankenstein monster that could come back to haunt, and the Houthis are absolutely a creation of Iran, and this is the great game that Iran has been playing in the Red Sea. And obviously, as Karthik mentioned, as Commodore Kesnur mentioned, this is India stands to lose a lot because of our vital trade interests that have been threatened. But thank you very much, Commodore Kesnur, for your insights, Karthik, for this clear and present danger to India's maritime commerce, the Red Sea being choked. India has to worry in the days ahead. Thanks for watching.